The Leica M Monochrome line of cameras have been around for a while now, and they've kind of solidified their place in Leica's lineup. Even some of the most die-hard black and white film shooters like Ralph Gibson even shoot with the monochrome cameras as opposed to just shooting black and white film. But a black and white digital camera, something that doesn't shoot color at all, that's pretty polarizing, but I think there's actually something to it. I think it's safe to say there's something to it because now it's not the Leica M Monochrome family, it's just the Leica Monochrome family. Today, Leica has revealed the Leica Q2 Monochrom. This is the first camera outside of the M lineup to offer a monochrome-only sensor. I've been shooting with this camera every day for the past week, so let's take a look at some photos and talk about it. Everything there is to love in the original Q2, aside from the colors you would get from the sensor, is all here in the Q2 Monochrome. You have this incredible 28mm f1.7 Summilux lens, which is just amazing. It has a built-in macro feature as well, which does drop the maximum aperture down to 2.8 as opposed to 1.7, but still being able to have a macro feature built in, it's really, really nice. You also have the same battery that the original Q2 uses, which is also the same battery used in the SL2 system, which I own and love. You also have weather sealing in the body, which is great for an everyday carry kind of camera. Other than that, you also have the same menu system, the same button layout. Everything is really minimal, really simple, and that's exactly what I want in a camera like this. That to me is what I think is the real strength in a camera like this, being an everyday carry kind of setup. You have a weather sealed body, which is great. You can take it with you anywhere. And with the 28mm focal length, to me, it's a really good sweet spot with this camera's resolution. For me, I really prefer 35mm focal length, but the 28 itself is really helpful if I do need that little bit of extra room. And if I want to shoot with a 35 in mind, there's a built-in crop mode, and because of the camera's massive resolution, cropping is actually a viable option. It gives you frame lines for 35mm, 50, and 75, but if you're shooting in DNG, which is the RAW format, it still holds all of the information from that 28mm focal length. So if you do decide to crop, if you're shooting RAW, you're not losing any information there. So for this example, I went ahead and shot 4 different photos, one at 28, one with the 35, one with the 50, and one with the 75 crop mode turned on. So this is the full frame that you're looking at right now. This is with the 35mm crop mode. This is with the 50mm crop mode, which is obviously a pretty heavy crop, but then we'll jump into the 75mm crop mode, and this is a really, really heavy crop. Now when I zoom in here, this is 3:1. This is a pretty insane amount of detail that you can still see in here. I could count these bricks if I really wanted to. From that, a 28mm lens shot at f5.6 from that far away, now you can see without the crop at all, that's how far back I was, and you can still see all of that detail. It's absolutely insane. That 47 megapixel sensor really does make a big difference when you're using these crop modes. Let's talk a little bit about this monochrome sensor. I think the biggest argument against this camera, or really any of the Leica monochrome cameras, is why would I buy that when I can just shoot a regular photo in color and then just convert it to black and white in post? Which you absolutely can do that. I do that myself a lot of the time with a lot of my digital files, and I think for most people that's the route to go because you're still going to have plenty of flexibility and you're not going to be limited by anything. You have both color and black and white in the same camera. But with this sensor only offering a monochromatic image, you obviously have to pre-visualize and think in black and white, and you're going to be shooting intentionally as a result of that. But all of that aside, it also gives you a few advantages that I think a lot of people don't realize. When you engineer a sensor to not have a colored filter array, you're actually going to allow each pixel to receive more light. There's no need for the interpolation that happens when you have to combine the RGB pixels to create a color image. The monochrome sensors in the M10 Monochrome and now the Q2 Monochrome and all of the previous monochrome cameras only record luminance, which are light levels. So what happens is you get increased sharpness or acutance like it's an even higher resolution sensor, an increased ISO range since each pixel is getting more light with better low light performance, and increased dynamic range as a result of that in the black and white tonality. From a practical standpoint, you're getting more sharpness with more flexibility in ISO performance. We obviously don't need it right now, but let's talk a little bit about this camera and the low light capabilities. For me, with an everyday carry kind of setup, that's one of the most important things because I'm in and out of bright situations and dark situations all the time. And in a lot of situations, I would probably just be putting the camera away because it's too dark to shoot. With this camera, with the low light capabilities all the way up to 100,000 ISO, you can still shoot in a lot more situations where otherwise you probably wouldn't. I tested out the low light capabilities of this camera in the backyard with the kids while they were just running around, and if I were shooting black and white film, I wouldn't be able to push the film this far, meaning I wouldn't be able to shoot with shutter speeds this fast. It's not going to be usable for every single situation, I think everybody knows that, but being able to have the photo versus not having the photo at all, to me that matters in moments like this. The video feature on the Q2 Monochrom is going to allow you to shoot up to 4K 30 frames a second, and just like the Q2 after a firmware update, right out of the box the Q2 Monochrom is going to give you full manual control over your settings. Obviously, being a monochrome camera with a fixed lens, it's not going to be the most well-rounded camera for video, but it's there if you want to use it. A black and white only camera is not for everybody. We both know that, and Leica knows that. This is not a camera that they're trying to get in everybody's hands. Something like this, any of the monochrome cameras, it's really for black and white enthusiasts who want really good image quality and that shooting experience. This camera is going to retail for $59.95 in US dollars, and I can already feel some of you scrolling down to the comments to start typing away. And before you do that, I want to remind you of the most important thing about the price with this camera, and really any camera for that matter, and that's that if it's too much, if you don't think it's worth the cost, you actually don't have to buy it. That's the beauty of it. Yelling at me in the comments about the price of a camera that I didn't make, it's not going to lower the price, it's not going to lower your blood pressure. Just take a deep breath and relax. There are far more things going on in the world right now to get worked up over. Photography is not one of them. So if you have any questions about this camera at all, let me know in the comments down below. Big thanks to Leica for letting me shoot with this for the past week ahead of the launch. It's always appreciated. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.